looking as the flowers. I sit for hours, telling all the bluebirds, the Bill and Coo birds, pretty little baby.
WrestleMania 40. This is regarded by many as the greatest WrestleMania of the modern era, by some as the greatest WrestleMania of all time, and not just for the WrestleMania itself, but for the build-up. So the question, as this video asks, is, was WrestleMania 40 and its build-up too good? Now, whether something can be too good, I guess, depends on your perspective. Can anything be too good? If something's too good, it's really good, it's good. Why would it be too good? And I guess it's more around the perspective that maybe it's now created in the wrestling world and how people have viewed WrestleMania 41, the build-up, and WrestleMania 41. And now, as we are 1 week, as I'm recording this video, 1 week, just so you know, 1 week, I will be in the air. 1 week from Thursday evening at around 8 p.m. as I'm recording this video, and hopefully uploading it tonight. I will be 1 week away from WrestleMania 42. So a lot of talk about the build-up to WrestleMania 42 and whether it's good or not. And I do feel like I've got a group of people that I know, friends that I know, who are absolutely loving the build for WrestleMania 42, enjoying it. And I've got a group of friends, people that I know, who are absolutely hating it, saying it's the worst build ever, blah, 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 which similar what they said around WrestleMania 41. We've got the IWC, the Internet Wrestling Community, and just for my take on what I mean by when I talk about the IWC, and it can be different for everyone else. Obviously, the internet, this is the internet. The internet is the world now. So it came, I believe, originally because people used to get on message boards, talk about wrestling for the first time that you could talk about with other people or give your opinion. Years and years and years ago, that's where the internet comes from. But when I say IWC, what I'm referring to is generally people who look at wrestling and look for the negatives, look to criticize it, look to, I could do, and have the sort of attitude that I could do better than. And that can be WWE, it could have been WCW in the day, AEW, TNA, New Japan, whatever the organization is, wrestling in general. You look at it and like, oh, I'm better than the Booker, I'm better than Triple H, I'm better than Vince, I'm better than Tony Khan, I'm better than Vince Russo, I'm better than, people probably are better than Vince Russo, but let's not go down that road. Bischoff, that sort of stuff, in terms of, oh, I would have booked it like this, I would have booked it like that. Very much from a fantasy booking, you might want to call it, point of view, and then generally get upset when it isn't booked the way they want. And we're going to talk about that when we get to WrestleMania 40's main event, because I do believe that's almost like fantasy booked to perfection. But so that's what I mean by that. And I think that group of people, that IWC of what I'm defining as the IWC, have thrown a lot of negative energy pre-Pat McAfee and post-Pat McAfee around the whole WrestleMania 42 build. And again, I've got this group of people which I'm in who absolutely enjoying the product, enjoying watching Raw and SmackDown each week, very much excited about, in my case, going to WrestleMania, for people who are going to watch WrestleMania. I'm excited by the build-up, some huge matches, Roman Reigns versus CM Punk, Brock versus Ober's perfection in terms of the build-up. So to the point of the video is, as WrestleMania 40's build-up and its actual execution caused an issue, and now this is the bar that has been raised. And I'm going to talk through why I think that might be the case. But again, in a matter of perspective, can something be too good? Should you just be enjoying what you're enjoying? Because ultimately, let's make things absolutely clear in this video. Wrestling is probably the dumbest form of entertainment, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. I've watched wrestling for over 35 years. My first WrestleMania was WrestleMania 6. It is now WrestleMania 42. It will be the 36th year that I'm watching wrestling. I have a wrestling channel. And just to shout out, if you are watching this and you are not subscribed, we are about just over 100 away from 15,000 subscribers. So if you are not subscribed and you are watching this and you are listening to me talk about wrestling, something that I dearly love, but I'm very aware that is a silly form of entertainment, please subscribe. That's just a quick ask. But yes, just a perspective here. Wrestling is a form of entertainment. And I don't believe this perspective, this IWC, whatever you want to, is exclusive to wrestling these days. And maybe it's not exclusive to these days. And maybe this is just an old man now with experience of watching loads of stuff and experiencing life and experiencing ups and downs in life, ups and downs in watching stuff and enjoying stuff and not enjoying stuff. In that, and I say this and it really winds people up. And I think I say this more because I think it winds certain people up. I think it's from The Rock, but maybe Triple H said it as well. And The Rock said it ironically in the build up to WrestleMania 40. I think he said something about told someone in the audience to shut up and said enjoy the ride. But enjoying the ride, whether that is wrestling or whether that is Game of Thrones or Stranger Things or Succession or whatever TV shows you're watching, at the moment. And looking for the positives and looking to enjoy it, because ultimately these things that we are watching, and we're talking about wrestling here, but whether any of those series that I mentioned, you're watching for enjoyment. This is your downtime. This is your time away from your job, your busy life and your family life and whatever it is, and or it might be something you do with your family. As you know, if you watch this channel regularly, I watch wrestling a lot with my daughter. I watch wrestling with my friends. I went to WrestleMania 39 and 40 with my daughter. I went to WrestleMania 41 last year in Vegas, and this year with three of my friends this year. We've got an extra friend coming as well. I enjoy these things. So again, you're watching these things either on your own in enjoyment, or you're watching these things with people to enjoy ultimately. And so that mentality and that thing, and again, maybe it's just me sounding like an old man, and please give me your perspectives in the comments. Is it maybe just an old man's perspective who's had some experience that actually I'm going to enjoy this, I'm going to look for what I'm going to enjoy rather than what I'm not going to enjoy? And actually, you've heard me on this channel before, if I'm not enjoying DIY versus Motor Machine Guns, I'll just forward it on Netflix and I just won't watch it on SmackDown. If I'm not enjoying a certain wrestler, Rusev, for example, and this is no disrespect to these wrestlers, these are on the lower ends of my joy, I'll just forward it. I won't make a video about not enjoying Motor City Machine Guns or Rusev or whoever it is. I feel like I've picked on those people, but in terms of that, and it won't be my sort of basis for watching this and moaning and whatever. I can skip it, as we all can. And and lots of people don't watch the whole show. They watch clips on YouTube, and so they'll watch what you want to watch and watch the stuff that you want to enjoy. So maybe it is, again, like I said, it is my video, it's my channel, so this is my perspective. But in a way, I guess we had that high. And now, although I think it's like a popular, maybe this is an IWC thing as well, a popular opinion now to say, oh, actually, maybe WrestleMania 40 wasn't that good and WrestleMania 39 was better. And WrestleMania 39 was phenomenal as well. So it's up there in my top 5 WrestleManias with WrestleMania 40. So, but I don't know if that's just the thing that people have jumped on the trend now, saying, oh, the build-up wasn't that good for WrestleMania 40. I mean, as I said, I've watched wrestling for over 35 years. For me, January 2024 to the payoff of WrestleMania 40 night to April 2024 was the best 3-month period in the history of professional wrestling from my perspective. From everything that happened, and we all know the story of how it should have been The Rock versus Roman Reigns, and someone who's wanted that match for years and years and years. I would have loved that. But absolutely, the pivot and to what we got was phenomenal. And no matter how good a build up to The Rock and Roman Reigns at that time would have been, and no matter how good a match, and The Rock proved he can still go, I think in the first night of WrestleMania 40, it wouldn't have topped what we got from January to April. We had, and this is just the main event I'm talking about, we had that press conference in Vegas where The Rock slaps Cody Rhodes. The some of the chat. I mean, there was a period of time for about maybe 3 or 4 weeks where sort of every Friday evening, The Rock would just cut this 17-minute promo on his Instagram and just post it. And it was so long, I remember a couple of them were so long that it had to be 2 Instagram videos, and it was clearly unedited. It was just done. This was like, The Rock had come back to wrestling and it now developed this final boss character. And I say this about Dwayne Johnson all the time. For all his success in Hollywood and in wrestling and all that, for me, the peak of Dwayne Johnson and in any character that he's played in any movie or TV show or anything like that is the final boss. It was perfect. It was perfect at the time. nobody saw it coming because they were like, oh, how is this going to work with The Rock? The Rock decided to turn heel. And we got, like I said, 3 months of near perfection and enjoyment, and a phenomenal build to WrestleMania. You know, in terms of that main event, like I said, you were getting The Rock cutting promos. You got that Raw episode in Chicago where The Rock wasn't supposed to be there, or no one thought he would be there, and he beat up Cody Rhodes, and of course, you know, he did the promo, Cody's bus and the belt and Mama Rhodes, and it was just the heightened time for wrestling. And I know so many people, genuine, real people, not people on the internet, real people who got back into wrestling then, who got into wrestling then. So that's fantastic. So many friends around my age who hadn't watched it for years, who had dipped in and out and not really got into it. That was their moment. That was their sort of 2020, beginning of 2024. The Rock, obviously, people could sit up and take notice because you don't have to be a wrestling fan to follow The Rock on Instagram. You don't have to be a wrestling fan to watch his movies, to know who he is, to know he's genuinely one of the top 5 most famous people on the planet. And we were having The Rock not just back doing the usual stick where, you know, he rock bombs at Austin Theory or something like that, or Jinder Mahal. It was a genuine, okay, I'm going to get into the storyline, and it was supposed to be one thing, then it got to be something else. And like I said, we got, in my opinion, the best 3 months of wrestling build-up and payoff that we got. So, but it wasn't just that. If I look, I'm just looking at the card now, you know, some of the other build-up we got was superb. Io and Bailey and the whole Damage Control storyline was fantastically done, you know, in terms of that build up to Bailey winning the Royal Rumble was a great moment. And, you know, she was still a heel at that point, and then the turn, and then her and Io and that pose, I remember on SmackDown when they finally snapped on the thing. And obviously they had been talking about Bailey in Japanese, and Bailey had been listening because she could understand Japanese. That whole build up, you know, the one disappointing match of WrestleMania 4 was obviously Jimmy versus Jay, and I think they've said it themselves, you know, but the build-up was brilliant. You know, the build-up was brilliant to that, and you could take one bad match on a 2-night card. We got a phenomenal build-up. Drew getting annoyed that it was second fiddle to that, and then you had, you know, brilliantly done. CM Punk had just come back to WWE, unfortunately got injured in the Royal Rumble. And how do we still use CM Punk? And this is how you use CM Punk fantastically to help with the Seth and the Drew feud, and keep it really alive between him and Drew, and then take it into the next best feud after the Bloodline for that year was obviously Drew versus Punk. And, you know, that whole bit, I remember, and again, look, there's biases when I talk about WrestleMania 40 because I was in Philadelphia with Talia, and it was just an awesome weekend from getting there. Philadelphia, I say this all the time, is genuinely the friendliest place, as friendly as any places I've been in the world. I don't know what to expect. All I knew about Philadelphia before was, you know, the Rocky Steps, which we did and we loved. And, you know, if you look right back 2 years ago on the channel, we've done a race up the Rocky Steps. We so I've known that from Rocky, and that was my knowledge of Philadelphia, but genuinely one of the most friendly places, if not the most friendly place I've ever been. So that whole bit, and then to lead it, and you know you're going to something special. Again, I've talked about this before. It was freezing cold. That night 1 of WrestleMania was so cold, and it's why they won't do a WrestleMania in an outdoor stadium on the East Coast ever again, because of that early April weather was freezing, and everyone had the time of their life. Everyone knows the 65, 70,000 people who were there for each night, knows you were part of history, know you're part of something special, and not just night 2 in the last sort of 15 minutes of the main event, but all of it. You know, okay, you might say Becky and Rhea's match wasn't amazing, it was a good match. Rhea's entrance I'll always remember, in terms of that ladder match out of nowhere was an absolute banger. Like, that had no rhyme or reason to be. That tag team ladder match had to be an absolute banger, and you know, in terms of that. Like I said, Jimmy and Jay most disappointing, but you know, I will always, one of my most fondest memories, and it's quite similar now because we've got Sammy saying, or people saying Sammy stole the spot from Carmelo Hayes, and I've got a lot more sympathy for Carmelo Hayes than I had for Chad Gable. But 2 years ago, people were saying it should have been Chad Gable's moment. I promise you, being in that stadium, Sami Zayn was the absolute right person to beat Gunther for the Intercontinental title, and it was Gunther's first loss in 600 days or whatever he'd lost. It was first loss in 600 and something days since he won the title. I think it was his first clean or his first loss on the main roster, if I'm mistaken. That was a phenomenal moment. He did that. What was it? That brain? Is it brain buster? He did Sammy 2 haluva kicks, and that was again, you're feeling part of it. And then you get to the main event, and you get to Dwayne coming out. You get to, I mean, obviously the entrances were like 20 minutes in total, but all of them. But again, you're seeing The Rock wrestle for the first time properly in a long time. So his last proper match really was 29 against Cena, which wasn't a great match because he got injured in the match. But I know he had that 2-minute match with Luke Harper, but realistically, this was Eric Rowan, not Luke Harper. But this was realistically his first match in over a decade, and I think it went an hour or something. Maybe not an hour, but it went long. And maybe on TV, and maybe people watching in the UK were tired because it's 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever. But I promise you, in that stadium, it was special, and you know what you were watching. And again, and that was just night one, and we go through night two, and obviously we had highlight after highlight. That opener between Seth and Drew, I think, is probably their best match. It's a different match because they always are good. They've got great chemistry. I mean, Seth Rollins is one of the best wrestlers in the world. His chemistry with most people, but they had a phenomenal match, and just that ending of him there over celebrating in front of CM Punk. CM Punk then doing the look, the blowing the kiss, so many callbacks to so many things of blowing the kiss, which was obviously a throwback to his Money in the Bank win over John Cena. The look, which is the meme on the internet of when the Judgment Day's music hit, Damien Priest actually cashing in. I have to say one bit about WrestleMania 40 that made it so special was Samantha Irvine, who was phenomenal. And I don't know whether she'll end up going to AEW or she'll ever come back. I know she wants to do other stuff, and I know she's released music and stuff like that. But she, no disrespect to Alicia Taylor, who's fantastic, and Lillian Garcia, who's fantastic, and the other guy, Mark, whatever his name is, who I can't remember. They're all good ring announcers, but Samantha Irvine, especially, and I think people again now will reflect back and go, "Oh, she was showing too much emotion" or whatever, but I think it's widely known that she doesn't know what's going to happen, and it was some genuine emotion. And I promise you, if you were in that stadium, and again, if you were watching, you were absolutely part of that moment. Bailey and Io is one of the most favorite technical matches I've seen. I have to say, best reversal I've ever seen live, and maybe best reversal I've ever seen was the rose plant into her Io flipping up. And Bailey's moment, a bit like Sami Zayn before. I know it's not as big as being Io Sky as it was a thing, but you could see this as Io she had got to that level and has stayed at that level now for that thing. And then of course, and we've talked about it on this channel so many times, the most epic, and I rated it, if you haven't watched it, I've rated all 47 WrestleMania main events, and this is the one that I've rated as the best WrestleMania main event. Cody Rhodes versus Roman Reigns, Bloodline Rules for the undisputed WWE Championship, or undisputed Universal WWE Championship, as it used to be called then. And we get that last sort of 10-15 minutes where everyone, Jimmy J, Solo, John Cena, The Rock, Seth Rollins, Undertaker, all interfere, and then we get the ending. And after 2 years, Cody finally finishes his story, which is what I'll always say. About 39, it was I said it at the time, it was the right decision for Roman to win. I think Cody had that long 9 months out with injury before. I think, people are talking about the crowd turning on Cody, which I think is a nonsense. It's a John Cena thing. It's a babyface thing in 2026. I promise you, a huge amount of the crowd, of all crowds, are with Cody still. Am I expecting the majority of the crowd to support Cody at WrestleMania? No, as I wasn't last year. He's going up against Randy Orton, and he's going up against went up against John Cena last year. So we got that, and obviously I can create an entire video that lasts 15 hours talking about how good that main event was. But we got that, and we got the build up before to it, across all the matches, and particularly across the main events and the Drew bit, and CM Punk getting involved and everything like that. We had a phenomenal build up to that WrestleMania. So to go back to the question of this video, has it ruined stuff? And I guess, has it ruined it, or was it too good? In the way that now people look at things as the bar. Is that the bar? Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you can argue that's the bar. If I'm telling, from my perspective, that's the best build and the best 3 months and the best WrestleMania and the best main event, that is the bar, right? However, does that mean that the product is terrible now and it's the worst it's ever been and Triple H should get replaced by Vince McMahon and this and all? Absolute garbage from my point of view. That's absolute garbage. The product is doing phenomenally well, right? TKO's stocks and shares, and if you want to look at their price, they floated at $100. Be quick. We don't want to talk about money because it's about wrestling, but $100 a share. They went down when the whole Vince scandal came, I think, to around $80. They're now on 200 and something, just over 200, I think. It's the last time I checked. In terms of what they're doing, they're double what they started, and they're more than double where they were at their low when Vince left, which was just before WrestleMania 40, wasn't it? So I think that is a sign. Are there things wrong with WWE? The biggest thing that has been wrong, I think, is the WrestleMania ticket prices in general, but the WrestleMania ticket prices, which I've said consistently. Like, as someone who goes to these shows, I cannot keep affording to pay more and more and more. Thankfully, this year we got a good deal on the ticket. We actually got a better deal than we did last year. I wasn't going to buy early. I was going to leave it till quite late, probably now, and look to get a deal, or maybe even look a few days before. My friends were up for that. But when you're looking, as you know, the surge pricing, sometimes the surge pricing comes off and all of that, and we ended up getting I think, a better view and a decent seat for actually quite a bit less than we did last year. So absolutely, do I think that there are stuff wrong in terms of the actual product and the enjoyment? I think people can conflate two things, and you can be anti-TKO and you can be anti this, and and people have got this UFC and they did this to UFC. Well, I'll be honest, I know absolutely nothing about UFC. My biggest knowledge of UFC was when I watched Ronda Rousey in her last UFC fight, last mixed martial arts fight, against that Holly Preacher woman, and she got kicked in the head, and I was like, what is this big fuss about Ronda Rousey? And she's come into wrestling, and she transitioned really well, especially the first year into the WWE. So I don't know what TKO did with UFC, and you may argue that they've done that. However, in terms of the actual product, I think you really have to look hard, and you have to exert more energy to look for stuff that you're not enjoying right now, than if you're just exerting the energy to enjoy the product. And we go back to what I first talked about, is that this is your hobby. This is for 99% of the people watching this. There are a few people who get paid to do YouTube shows, who get paid to talk about wrestling, and but this is the absolute less than 1% of people who watch wrestling are in that thing. If you're in that 99 point whatever it is percent of people, and I'm including myself in that, this is your enjoyment. You're here to enjoy the show. This is your thing. And again, I go back to like a Game of Thrones, and and I'm going to drop a controversial opinion. I don't think the last season of Game of Thrones was as bad as people think. I think people have build up. Is it the weakest season out of all of them? Yes, it's the 8th season is the weakest season. However, I'm not going to derail too much into Game of Thrones. However, I do believe, and similar with Stranger Things this year, or Christmas when it came out, people build a certain ending. And maybe this is not a 2025, 2026, 2020s phenomenon. And maybe it's just me being an old man now, and this has always been the case. But I do believe that people build up a certain expectation of how they want a Game of Thrones to end, how they want a Stranger Things to end, who should have died, who should have not died, how they should have died, and all of this. And you build yourself up into this whole thing where you've built this fantasy in your head. And this is where I describe the IWC as I do. And if it doesn't go your way, then actually, you're really disappointed with that. It was terrible. It was awful. It was terrible. Don't forget that, 60,000 people in the crowd absolutely loved what they saw. I went to Madison Square Garden for the first ever time, and I saw Raw last week, and I came out absolutely buzzing. Everyone that was around us, me and Talia, as we were leaving, were absolutely buzzing of what a great show it was. The Yoba and the Brock stuff was phenomenal. The Punk stuff at the end, we're putting Roman through a table, and then him coming up and doing the stuff that he was doing afterwards. The whole Cody and Stephanie McMahon opening it. It was, and again, you feel like, again, this is a bit corny, but you feel like you're in a special place. The home of the WWE, the home of WrestleMania 1, of WrestleMania 10, of WrestleMania 20. It's a place of huge history. You go into it and you go there, and I think, whether you're from New York or not from New York, or you're going to the show or you're traveling through or whatever it may be, you feel that and you come out. But then I get told by people, it was only okay, the show, I'm not that excited. The only match, seems to be a common thing of the only match I'm excited about is Brock versus Oba. And which is interesting because these are the same people who didn't want Brock back. And you can not want Brock back from a moral point of view. I completely get that. And there's been a lot about Kanye West in the news today, in the news, not today, in this week and all of that, whether, we should be allowed, and all that. But, I've learned over the last few years of this sort of cancel culture, you end up cancelling a lot of people. You end up not seeing a lot of people. I mean, and so if you really feel strongly about it, well, you felt so strongly about Brock not coming back morally, yet now you're telling me it's the best built-up match, and you're not going to watch it? Are you going to skip it? Are you going to skip it out of the thing? You're not going to watch the whole event because they're all clearly people. So that's another video, isn't it? That's a whole bit around cancel culture and where you go with it, and Kanye West and Brock Lesnar and Vince McMahon and blah, blah, blah. Michael Jackson, who not has a movie, but there is a huge movie coming out in a couple of weeks about Michael Jackson, which I'm sure will engage a lot of debate around everything and that. But to the point of enjoying it, is the build up to WrestleMania 41 and 42, or was 41 and 42 as good as the WrestleMania 40 build up? No. But were the 39 WrestleManias before that? In my opinion, no. There was elements. I mean, you look at 17 and Stone Cold and The Rock, and it actually delivering, and then, and the whole event being great. Yeah, absolutely. So you're talking about two maybe where the build up has absolutely, been peak. And then the event has been peak, so maybe 70. And there's a few else in there who really good build up for. 26 is a really sleeper one. I think people get the Undertaker and Shawn Michaels' last match, because we don't talk about the Saudi stuff. So the Shawn Michaels' last match, and I think that whole build up to 26. And what was it? Cena and Batista, I thought had a really good build up. I thought was it Edge and Jericho? I think they had a really good build up as well. They did with that. So they there are times, but again, we're talking in a 42-year history of build ups and WrestleManias and events. And so I do think the message of this video, and there's a phrase I like to use, and as I say, I like to use, or I go by, or I would say. It's something that I try and live by. Do I live by it perfectly? And I'm not going to get too deep here, don't worry. But it can apply to watching wrestling or watching stuff or enjoying stuff or doing your job or whatever. And it's from one of my all-time favorite movies, which is Heat. And in it, they're talking about doing one last big job. They're back robbers, so they're talking about doing one last big job, which will get them, fucked tons of money. And there's one of the guys in it who doesn't need the money. I think he's set in life. I can't remember exactly. He's set in life and saying, and he says, and he agrees to do it. And he goes, for me, the action is the juice. And that, for me, the action is the juice. It's the build up. It's the enjoyment of the whole thing. It's I'm gonna make the most of this. I'm gonna enjoy it. I'm gonna enjoy the action. Yes, the juice may be a great main event between CM Punk and Roman Reigns, or it may be a surprising, because everyone thinks it's going to be terrible, Randy Orton and Cody Rhodes, or Obo and Brock and all that. But actually, I'm going to enjoy this 7-8 week build up to WrestleMania. I'm going to enjoy going to WrestleMania. I'm going to enjoy WrestleMania weekend around it. I'm lucky enough to be able to go to Vegas for that weekend with my friends and enjoy everything that comes with WrestleMania weekend, everything that comes with a long weekend in Vegas, and for me, that's the sort of the answer to my own question that I posed at this video, is in a way, yeah, but it was too good, because it has changed people's perspectives on what is supposed to be wrestling now, or what is supposed to be, what we're supposed to get from it. But that absolutely does not mean, and this is where the perspective comes in, that even if I look back at the 41 build, which people will tell me it was terrible, or the build was terrible, some of those John Cena, Cody Rhodes, we were lucky enough to go to the SmackDown and the Raw in the O2. Some of the John Cena and Cody Rhodes promos, CM Punk and Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman and Seth Rollins, all of that build, I thought was brilliant. So again, was the build up to the level of WrestleMania 40? No. Was the build still really, really good? And yes, okay, I will give you that. Cody versus John Cena, just with Travis Scott and without The Rock, and then never getting a payoff from that. I agree. I was the one saying give them time and patience. I thought we would eventually get a payoff with Travis Scott, The Rock, and we never did. And fair enough. But then they did, in fairness to Cody, and Cena made it up with, I think, the match of the year of 2025 at SummerSlam, which, where Cody wins the belt back, and they're both baby faces, and it was brilliant. So I would, if you're still watching after a half an hour video, then I would urge people to enjoy the ride. I would urge people to take that phrase about the action being the juice and enjoy it for what it is. Take the bits of the, you might not be enjoying. I've said clearly that I think the Rhea and Jade, I think that they're the best segment on Raw last week or this week, a few days ago. But there's been a weak build up between Rhea and Jade, and I'm not really. It came together late because she won the Elimination Chamber. They never had any rivalry before. It's not really clicked. They could have a phenomenal match, right? So, but I'll be honest, it's not the one I've enjoyed the most out of the 13 matches. That it's probably the one that I've enjoyed the least in terms of the build up to 13 matches. But I think there's so much to enjoy. The ascension of Trick Willie into this position where they're going to clearly do a double switch. Although they don't have a choice but to do a double switch. The crowd are going to do a double switch in terms of Sami Zayn, who is already getting booed, Trick Williams is already getting cheered. And in terms of Trick becoming a babyface, as long as he doesn't change character, we don't want that because that's why he's getting cheered. So you've got that. Yeah, I think that's been a great build up between that. Could Carmelo still get added? Would I be upset? No. Would I be pleased? Yes. But at the same time, Sami Zayn can make someone look phenomenal. And I think people are forgetting on Sami Zayn in terms of his pure abilities, experience at WrestleMania. This man has been, a WrestleMania main eventer. He's been in some huge WrestleMania matches. He's been in some huge story, the biggest storyline in wrestling history, probably over 3 or 4 years with the Bloodline. His part was arguably one of the best parts in that whole Bloodline story. So you've got build up to that. I think the Liv, and I said this 5 weeks ago, I thought it would be a slow build to Liv versus Stephanie Becker. I think they've done a phenomenal job. Liv getting real bumps is probably not part of the plan, but and I think it's twice where Stephanie's gone into her quite hard. Once on the entrance ramp, and obviously last week backstage. And if you haven't seen the photos of Liv, but I think they've built that perfectly. They've added the personal element. Liv talking about Stephanie's mum. It's about Liv's background versus Stephanie's background. There is that simmering bit of Raquel and Roxanne in the background, and they don't have a match at WrestleMania, so what happens with there? One thing I am hoping for, and now I'm going to go into the fantasy booking thing, and I've said this, the one match that I have fantasy booked myself for WrestleMania from last summer was Io versus Asuka, and we are so close to getting it. Asuka said to open the challenge. Io's answered it, I think, on social media. Apparently, the story is that if Nikki Bella's not fit, then the Kabuki Warriors are going to get added to the tag team match, and that's why they won't announce Io versus Asuka. Okay, I'm going to go into the trap now that I've told you not to go into. That seems like a terrible waste. A WrestleMania match between two of the best Japanese women wrestlers, two of the best women wrestlers. Forget Japanese. Io versus Asuka, so much history there. Two phenomenal performers. Two women who've done really well on the grander stage as well. I've had some big matches at WrestleMania. I always remember WrestleMania 34 was a particular low light as a WrestleMania, but Asuka versus Charlotte and that mixed tag with Triple H, Stephanie, and Ronda and Kurt Angle, repping Kurt Angle today, you can see that, was great. And Asuka's best WrestleMania match, I think, was with Charlotte at WrestleMania 44. So then, and Io's obviously been a phenomenal, one of the best wrestlers in the world at the moment, male or female. So you've got that whole dynamic that you can add as well, which gives us a nice round 14 matches, which is generally what they go with, 7 on each night, and it adds it to night 2, which I believe only has 1 women's match, and the other night has 3 women's match. It feels too good to be true, but or too good not to make, but we'll see. And let's not head down that fantasy booking because I then got Dominic versus the Demon Finn Balor. I think there's been a really, really good build up. I don't need to talk about Oba versus Brock because everyone's talking about that, and that is obviously really, really well built in terms of every single segment. And again, being at Madison Square Garden, people on their feet for the entire segment of Heyman coming out, Brock talking, Oba coming out. They didn't even connect. They didn't even do anything in Madison Square Garden. They didn't even hit each other in Madison Square Garden. Nothing happened. They'd be up a lot of security guards, and Adam Pearce got a push. But I would urge you, again, if you're still watching at the whatever it is now, 35-minute mark or wherever we are, is to enjoy the ride, pick what you are enjoying rather than what you're not enjoying, and go with it. Again, this is your hobby. This is what you're doing in your downtime. This is what you're doing away from the stresses of whatever the stresses you have in life. This should be enjoyment. This should not be causing you anger or stress or worry. This should be something, okay, I'm going to take it. I'm going to take, there's 13 matches. I'm going to enjoy 9 of these matches. I'm going to enjoy the build for 9 of these matches. It's WrestleMania. It's Vegas. It's the grandest stage. God knows what we're going to do. Do we need to focus on what we're not enjoying, or do we need to focus on what we are enjoying? So that hasn't come across too preachy. I know it has, but I'm not going to go and edit it and take it out, because I think this is quite, I wanted this quite raw, pardon the pun, in terms of how I was feeling about the stuff. So I'll leave you again with that phrase from Heat. The action is the juice. Right. Please like, subscribe, comment. What are you enjoying about the build-up to WrestleMania 42? Do you think we'll ever get a WrestleMania 40 again? Probably not for the next 20 years, because that's how peaks work, and that's how something amazing happens. It can't be WrestleMania. And just to go on that bit again, because a lot of people had fantasy, and this, I forgot this point, a lot of people had fantasy booked a WrestleMania 40 main event, Bloodline Rules, with people running in and all of that. And I think, and that's what happened, right? But you cannot do that every single time. There was a perfect moment. It was a perfect storm of The Rock coming back. You know, maybe he wasn't doing well in Hollywood, so he came back. Who cares what the reason was? Maybe because he was on the board of TKO. Who gives a monkeys why he was back? He was back, and he was doing his best work. We had the whole Cody 2-year build-up of finishing story. We had a Roman Reigns 1,316 days as champion. We had the whole story between the history between, you know, obviously the Undertaker's the last one to appear, but John Cena and The Rock. And you can only do those sorts of things once in a generation, once in a 20-year thing, once in a I'm not going to say lifetime, because we say once in a lifetime in WWE and it becomes twice in a lifetime. But you cannot get to that build up, that hype, that payoff every time. That's not the thing. It wouldn't be if last year, you know, people were expecting a Rock, and I get it, and I get a lot of disappointment, you know, around only Travis Scott appearing in the main event. But if you got The Rock, and then you got, I don't know, Stone Cold appearing in Vegas, he did appear, but, you know, in terms of in that main event, you just have the same thing again, and you cannot have that. That would not be special. It'd be like, oh, it wasn't as good as last year, and oh, they've done it. All they're doing is copying that, and that's fine. You don't need that. You had people again look at WrestleMania 41 through this thing, and I think it's going to be one that you look back actually over years, and actually it was actually good. You know, it was actually better than I thought it was. We had two, I think we had two phenomenal. The women's triple threat match to open night 2 was fantastic. The men's triple threat match, Roman Punk and Seth to close night 2 with the Heyman twist at the end, I think was phenomenal. We had Dominic getting cheered in a great fatal four-way, winning the Intercontinental title. I think we had better matches than people will give it credit for, because they don't want to give it credit for, and it wasn't as good as WrestleMania 40. No, it wasn't. I agree. It wasn't as good as that. That doesn't mean it was terrible. I thought we had some great moments. So, you know, I look back, and I think again over the years, maybe in 3 or 4 years' time, people were like, actually, that WrestleMania 42 build-up was actually quite good. Look, this happened, that happened. And you know, it was the Pat McAfee thing odd. Is it a bit curveball and left field? Yes. Has it resulted in a great Cody promo and then a fantastic Punk promo, pipe bomb, whatever you want to call it, on Monday? Absolutely, yes. So have they made something out of it? Oh, are people going to say they're not going to watch SmackDown? Or actually, are we intrigued? Is Pat McAfee going to appear? Is Cody going to take some shots? Who else is going to appear? We are 1 week, just a bit over 1 week away from the penultimate SmackDown. The last SmackDown will be we know the last SmackDown in Vegas will be a filler show. There's going to be people who are wrestling who aren't on the card, and you're going to have a few promos, and that's it. And you're sold by then. Unless you live in Vegas or live very close to Vegas, you ain't watching SmackDown and then buy your ticket at the last minute, because you've already got a ticket for WrestleMania. So this is, you know, it feels like a big SmackDown on Friday, tomorrow night. Right, I've gone about 40 minutes, which is, I didn't plan this, but I guess 40 minutes for WrestleMania 40. And the ramifications of WrestleMania 40 seems about right. Now I am closing off the video. So as always, please like, please subscribe. And I'm most intrigued about your comments in terms of how you see my perspective on this. And again, I'll leave you with the last thing that I'm going to say, which is the action is the juice.